I read 9 books for the month of July. Let's talk about them. Welcome to Novel Beginnings. This month was a mixed bag. I read some disappointing romances, one DNF, and some very beautifully written literary fiction. Let's jump right in. But before I get there, I had done a video of a weekly wrap up where I had spoken about 3 books. I will not go into that details. I will put a link to that video and I will talk about these 3 books towards the end of the video. So let's just jump right in. The first book I'll talk about is the one that I DNF'd, and it is It's Not Her by Mary Kubica. Now, when I was doing my Goodreads top books of the year, this was one of the most read thrillers, and I was genuinely intrigued by the premise. So we are getting dual POVs. We have Courtney and Reese. Reese is 17 years of age, and Reese is Courtney's niece. And Courtney discovers her older brother, that is Reese's father, and her sister-in-law been bludgeoned to death. Her niece, Reese, is missing, and her nephew is fast asleep in a room upstairs unharmed. What has happened? Is Reese responsible? This is what the story explores. Now, for me, I kind of DNF'd it at about 35 to almost 40%. And why did I do that? So in the first 100 pages, we are getting, like, as I said, we are having alternating POVs between Courtney and Reese. So Courtney is kind of describing the events as they transpire from the discovery of the bodies and what's happening. And Reese is kind of describing the day when they arrived at the cottage. That kind of gives you a glimpse between the family dynamics between Reese and her parents and her brother and her younger sister. The first 100 pages of the book, I just see where Courtney discovers the bodies, treks down to the lounge and informs the officials. That's all. And for Reese's perspective, I get how they are on the road, family squabbles, and how they kind of reach the cottage and get comfortable and whatnot. That is it. This book is 300 pages long. I think 315 for the page, 315, I think. A third of the book is just this. And I felt the pacing was too slow for a thriller. For me, I have discovered that when I'm reading any kind of thrillers, I think by 25% mark, I am expected to see or just be introduced to the culprit and just to develop the intrigue and the suspense. But nothing, the main culprit did not show up. And like I said, there were so many unnecessary descriptions. I understand that the author wanted to create and build the atmosphere to kind of, make it feel spooky and suspenseful, but I think it was getting a little too much. It was getting a little repetitive and redundant at points, and I couldn't. And there was one particular scene with the teenage Reese, because she's 17 years of age, that was involved. I was quite uncomfortable reading that, and I'm like, was that necessary? Is that needed? So anyway, I DNF'd, unfortunately. I didn't like this book. But I'm not going to... I know Mary Kubica is a beloved thriller author. I'm going to try some of her other books, but this one wasn't for me. Anyway, moving on. The next book I want to talk about is People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young. I had read Out of the Woods last year. It was about a couple who are having a bit of a difficult time in the relationship, and that book kind of explores how they reconnect. And I genuinely loved that book. I think it had so much of emotional maturity and the characters, and you had this emotional development by the end of the book. I truly enjoyed it. So I was looking forward to this, especially when I read the premise that we have got Milo, who is this globe-trotting person who has been with a lot of people. He has a lot of experience with people. And Prudence, our female main character, who is living in this small town in Canada, is the town's darling, and she has a very healthy relationship with her parents. She is the apple of their eye. However, she is also struggling because her mother has Alzheimer's, and how she and her father kind of cope with that. That's also a very interesting and a very well written part of the story. My problem with the book was Milo and Prudence. I genuinely, to be honest, I liked how they met and how they kind of connected. I didn't have any problem with how the the relationship starts and how they kind of take interest in one another. My problem is that I felt there was an emotional dissonance for me as a reader. I felt that this book was overly focused on their physical connection. There are a lot of steamy and spicy scenes in the book, and I like my steamy and spicy scenes, but I don't want that to be the heart of the book. I want something more in terms of an emotional connect between those two characters, and I felt it was lacking in this one. I liked how the characters were by themselves. Milo was a considerate person. Prue was this bubbly, sweet young girl. But I just felt when the two came together, there wasn't much happening except for their physical relationship. That's why this kind of didn't. It kind of fell. It wasn't my favorite, and I gave this book 3 stars. And 3 stars, honestly, because I quite liked Prue's relationship with her parents. I also had Milo's relationship with his siblings. Those aspects kind of I liked, I enjoyed. But as far as the romance between these two are concerned, it kind of fell through for me. I gave this book, like I said, 3 stars. The next book I want to talk about is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. This is the 3rd book in the Friend Zone series, and with this, I finished the trilogy. Now, this book, I kind of went in with high expectations because the previous one was a success for me, and because, of course, it's Abby. This book does deal with quite heavy emotional themes. We have addiction, we have family dysfunctions, we have mortality. And primarily, this book explores a theme of living your life to the fullest when even the future is uncertain. And honestly, I quite appreciate these themes, and leave it to her to make these difficult themes, the way she addresses them, the way she tackles them in this book with such dexterity, with such sensitivity. I'll always applaud that. My problem with this book was the FMC Vanessa. She is like I said, she's in her mid-20s and she's a very famous influencer. She has this pick-me energy, which was kind of grating a lot of the times. And she also has this everything that she was doing was seemed very performative and very preachy with Adrian. Like, you live your life only once and go for it. And I don't know, it felt very juvenile. I don't know. Like I said, in the beginning, I was appreciative of the things she did, but as and when the story progressed, I felt she was also a little bit manipulative with our MMC, and I quite liked Adrian. He was the best MMC in the entire trilogy for me. Like I said, everything she was doing felt very performative. The other issue is that because she is an influencer, I think there was the way the author presented her life was a little bit of a hyperbole, like, people paying money to get her signed photographs. I'm like, she's an influencer, and in 2 years, she's amassed so many followers that she is kind of having sit-down dinners with Tom Hanks. It was a little too much for me to kind of, accept it. And I don't know, that character, her personality was just something I did not quite enjoy that much. So, but like I said, with this book, Abby does introduce a lot more heavier themes compared to, they had the heavier themes in the other 2 books, but this one, like I said, there were more heavy themes. And primarily the problem with me, with the book I had, was that Vanessa has this thing that none of the female members in her family has lived past the age of 30, and she knows she has this genetic predisposition towards a debilitating fatal disease, and she doesn't want to get tested or have a prognosis because she doesn't want to be probed and prodded like her older sister was. So she's kind of living her life knowing that, yes, something of this can happen with my sister, my mother has it, my grandmother had it, and whatnot, so I am bound to have this disease, but I'm not going to get checked. I'm going to live my life like this is the end, and I'm going to embrace when it comes to me. That premise was a little bit like, seriously? I don't know. It just didn't work with me. I gave this book 3 stars because There were some sweet moments with MMC, and it made me smile. But yeah, the rest of it was like, what's happening? Anyway, the next book I want to talk about is This a Cry for Help by Emily Austen. Now, this is not your conventional plot-driven book. This is heavily a character-focused book. And our character is Darcy. We are seeing Darcy when she receives this news of the passing of her ex-boyfriend Ben, and she kind of spirals. This book looks into grief and identity and existential dread. It looks at mental health. And because this book and the entire book is like we are sitting in Darcy's head. It's like a stream of consciousness narrative. And we are kind of privy to her innermost thoughts. We are looking at her vulnerabilities. We are looking at her struggles. We're looking at her past and the inner turmoil she kind of always is grappling with. I think it was very well done. There is a constraint that the author, the way she approaches these topics, there's a constraint in how she presents it to the readers. Because Darcy is a librarian, we get a social commentary on things like what kind of books belong to our shelves, who can read storybooks to our children. And that kind of presents another facet to our character. And I truly appreciate that outside of her conversations with a therapist and what is the inner workings of Darcy, we see how she is with the outside world. And that kind of presents another aspect to her. And I truly, truly like that. Now, like I said, it's a very slow book. There is nothing fast-paced. If you're looking for a book that has a quiet nature to it, and you want to just kind of take a seat, and this is the book that is going to come to you. And I really appreciated all these stances that the author presents, like mental health and the societal commentary about books and libraries. I think it is a lovely book from that perspective. For me, I was looking for a little bit of more resolution towards the end. I mean, I like how the book ended. I want a little more towards the resolution part, I think. But I truly enjoyed Emily Austen's writing, to be honest. Her writing reminded me a lot of Lily King's writing, that it's a bit of stillness to it, and I like that. And I truly enjoyed it. I gave this book 4 stars. Now, this book is one of the most talked about books. It is everywhere. And it definitely has had devastating consequences on its readers. And the one I'm talking about is Into the Blue by Emma Brodie. Now, I know this is a romance book, but to me, this was AJ's story. To me, it was more of AJ's tragedy in life more than her romance. And I'm going to approach that why to me it was more of AJ's story and her tragedy and not romance. So this is about AJ and Noah and how they meet when they were young in a rental store in early 2000s, and how they bonded over a love of a sci-fi series, and how that leads them to become improv partners. And while they're improv partners, there's a chemistry, and it is quite electric for them. But however, one day Noah just leaves without telling anything to AJ, and we see them after 7 years when AJ is in New York City and she's a writer because that's her dream. That Noah comes up and says, "Let's do a reboot of the series that we liked, and we're just gonna revive that." So this book is in, I think, 4 parts, and the second part is when the revival of the series happens, and the third part kind of proceeds after that. I have to say that I have to applaud and give like a standing ovation to the author, because honestly, when I was reading part 2 of the book, I was like, where is this story headed? I get the improv, I get the series, but what is the end result? Where are we going with the story? And how, as I went to part 3, how kind of the second part kind of ties into part 3, and how part 3 kind of ties into part 4. And I won't say it's done seamlessly, but you see why we had to read those episodes and those scenes to get where we are. So I really appreciate that the author was able to kind of tie all these elements together, which at first might seem quite sporadic and spread out, but then she's able to kind of rein it all in and present a complete picture. So I have to applaud Emma Brody for this audacious attempt, because, like I said, I was very skeptical as I was reading part two. I'm like, where is this going? I did like how AJ's character from 17 and how she grows, and we are seeing how this growth happens. She discovers aspects about herself. She has doubts and how she, kind of overcomes them. So for me, the story, like I said, is AJ's story. And my problem, or not problem, but why for me this is not a romance book is because I didn't get to know Noah a lot. I know he's very tall, and I know he's very handsome, and he smells great, and has lovely hands. I didn't get to see anything about his personality other than that. Except there is a part where, and it is not a spoiler because it is written in the blurb, that Noah tells AJ they cannot be together. So somewhere in part two, it is revealed why they cannot be together, and it is quite an emotional moment, and that is where I really felt for Noah's character and my MMC. However, beyond that, I didn't get to see anything about him, and like I said, that I'm reading this book from AJ's perspective. I'm reading AJ's story. I sometimes had a bit of a struggle to understand where is the romance. I understand they met when they were so young, and there is definitely chemistry. There's this whole fated mate thing going on. I was struggling to find the love. And because of that reason, to me, it was not a romance book for me. It was AJ's story and her tragedy. But having said that, I did like the book. I think Emma Brody is a fantastic author, and like I said, I'm in awe of how she presented such a unique way of presenting these two characters through improv, and it was very well done. I gave this book 4 stars. My other issue with the book is, apart from Noah, I didn't mention, is I think the book was a little bit long. It could have done, if part 2 and part 4 were trimmed a little bit, part 2 and part 3 were trimmed a little bit, this book could have been a good 380 pages and not 470 pages, or however long this book was. I just felt it was a little too long. But I did have fun reading this book. I was emotional, maybe not devastated as many other readers were, but I did have my tearful moments as I was reading this book. The last book I will talk about is Good People by Patmina Sabit. Now, this book was truly exquisite. This book explores the story of immigration, of achieving the American dream, about grief, about perception, about people. And we get to see that through the Saraf family. We learn about this family through various accounts that their friends, their neighbors, government officials present to us. This whole book is essentially a collection of multiple POVs. It's like a documentary of sorts. And people who have known them from the time they landed in the United States and how they built up from literally scratch and how they became this embodiment of the American dream is what this book explores. And everything is all rosy and beautiful until a tragedy strikes his family and everything kind of starts crumbling down. At the onset, the whole structure of multiple POVs might be like, is it going to present us a clear picture? Are we going to be able to see all these characters and how they're essayed out? I think the author does a brilliant job of doing this. I was completely enraptured on how she was able to present this picture, and block by block you're presented from the times they arrived to the times they made their money and they became a kind of a big name in the society, how their children grew up. It does in a very cohesive and a very structured manner. And you also kind of see how the perception of people, how it is built, how their perception of this family changes with time. And it's very interesting. Like, yes, it is about identity and immigration and grief and society, but it's also about how people view you, and how there is this whole thing about what will people say, and how you have this persona, this facade for people, and how they gauge you and your values and your people based on that facade. It was such a layered commentary on so many aspects of life. And like I said, I was so in awe of how this was done. It was a fantastic book. It's a heavy book because it does talk about some heavy themes. But again, it's so well presented. It's so well done. I mean, as a reader, you're kind of putting all those pieces together, and at the end of the book, you kind of have the whole picture come out of it. And I truly appreciated it. And I have to say that both the two books that I mentioned, Good People and Into the Blue, the presentation, how the books were presented, was so unique, and yet and they kind of both stuck the landing. I have to comment on that, because it was. I applaud when authors take such risks and when the risks pay off. I was truly moved reading A Good People, and I cannot stop talking about this. I cannot stop recommending this book. I gave this book 4.75 stars. Why not 5 stars? I just feel that towards the end, I wanted a little bit more for closure. And that was like I was expecting that a little bit. That's just something very personal. That's just me. I wanted a little bit more in terms of the resolution, but otherwise, this book was fantastic. And I want to include the 3 books I did in my weekly wrap-up, and it was Axeman's Carnival by Catherine Chiji. I had Enormous Wings, and I had Emma M. Lyon's first books, and those 3 were fantastic. I think my best book of the month, I have to give it to Axeman's Carnival. It was a 5-star for me. It was, again, such a fabulous read. I think this month marks how unique stories and unique ways of presenting stories I read through the eyes of a magpie, through accounts of the whole story. The whole book of like The Good People is a collection of people talking about multiple POVs and painting this picture through talking about how you do improv, and you have you do a revival of a beloved series, and how that kind of leads to developing the relationship between two characters. And Into the Blue, I was completely, it was something so new to me, and as somebody who's still exploring so many different books and so many ways of presenting books, I was completely in awe. And this is why I love reading, because you discover so many new things, so many new aspects. So it was a fabulous month. Axeman's Carnival was my favorite, and my second book was, of course, Good People by Patmina Sabid. I loved these 2 books. When I said disappointment, yes, my 2 romance books were a bit of a disappointment for me, but I am not going to lose hope. I will always read Abby's books. They are an auto-buy for me. And even for Hannah Bonham Young, I think she brings something very unique in her stories in terms of the emotional bandwidth, the emotional depth in her characters, and I always appreciate that. This one didn't work for me, but I am looking forward to reading more books by them. And yes, Mary Kubica's book was a DNF for me, but like I said, she's a much beloved thriller author. I'm going to read a couple of more books by her to see that if I am the audience for her or not. But yes, I hope you have enjoyed watching this video as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to you. Take care of yourselves, and thank you for watching. And do write down in the comments any books you have read, the ones I have mentioned, any books you want me to read in the future. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.